Kia ora everyone, I hope you're well. I myself am doing very good. I got my hair cut, just got it done today and feeling so much better. But this video is not about that. This video is about my thoughts on comedy, but more specifically my thoughts on the comedy scene in Melbourne. And for those of you who might not know me, my name's Madeleine, I'm a Leo, and I moved to Melbourne in 2023, and I started my comedy journey in March of that same year. The thing is, it's not as though I was new to performing, theatre, improv, but it had been a while. And my involvement has been very sporadic, inconsistent. Sometimes I'll be really active and then other times not so much for reasons that will soon become clear. I really like structure as well, so I've tried to categorize everything. It's a little bit tricky too because there's a lot of cross-pollination with a lot of the stuff that I talk about, so it may get a bit rambly, which is very on brand for me. I think that is it for the introduction. So, first topic. I'll begin by talking about confidence. So, like I mentioned, I was very rusty, very out of practice, and not only that, I had just moved to a new country and it can be very disorienting, takes some time to find your feet. Not only that, I didn't have any support network here whatsoever. So that was really daunting, you know, getting up on stage by myself. But I'm really glad that I did. I'm really glad that I took the leap. And I think like any skill, right, it requires practice and perseverance to get better. And then one day, you do your 5 minutes, you get off stage, and then another comedian says to you, "You seem really comfortable." And that made me so happy because it's moments like that that make you realize, oh my goodness, I have come so far. Because when I tell you, like, I'm not going to get into the whole story. If you are interested to know how my first couple of times went, I've already made a video about that. I'll link it somewhere. But I felt so ill. I was really nervous. I wanted to throw up. And I still get nervous, but it's nowhere near as bad. And the other thing as well is I'm currently working on my show, my first comedy show for ComFest next year. And this is something I never, or I'm pretty confident that I never would have considered doing a show. But moving to Australia, meeting other comedians, seeing others succeed, my peers, people with more experience, less experience, it made me go, oh, okay, I think this is something that I could do. And I think something I find really interesting about Australia or Australian culture is people are really good at promoting themselves, advocating for themselves, backing themselves. And that's something that, you know, myself as a New Zealander and other New Zealanders could learn. Because I remember talking to another New Zealand comedian and she said, oh, you know, people can be so arrogant, which is true. There is definitely an element of that. But however, I just think that it's confidence, baby, and it's really admirable. There were definitely times where I second-guessed myself, but overall, I felt really good. And every performance I've done, I feel like there's always been at least one or two people in my corner, and that's all that matters. So while we're on the topic of being comfortable on stage, for me, one of the most important things was learning to be comfortable with silence. Maybe you are an intentionally antagonistic, edgy comedian and people understandably don't like that. Valid. Or maybe you can hear a pin drop because, let's be honest, the joke, it's a first draft, you haven't really tested it out, still need some work. Or maybe you're just not for everyone, and that's okay. I have to say, it's really encouraged me to put my ego to the side, because if they laugh, that's great. Of course, that makes me happy. It's kind of the goal of being a comedian. But also, for me personally, if what I'm saying prompts other emotions too, if it makes people consider things from an alternative perspective, I'm stoked with that. You know, I'm quite interested in the infotainment space, so I think that's a win as well. Something else worth mentioning, you know, there are multiple occasions where a comedian will say a joke that makes me go, and then it'll get a really big response from an audience. And I think about that quote, you know, that Rick and Morty quote, and I'll edit it slightly so that it's a bit more relevant to the context of what I'm talking about. Your silence means nothing. I see what makes you cheer. I say all this because I see it happen time and time again. Comedians will tell jokes, the audience won't like it, they won't understand it, whatever it is, there will be silence. And what happens? Well, sometimes they get defensive. They're like, oh, well, you know, this would have killed at insert room here, or, oh, well, yeah, maybe that just went over your head. Or they'll take an alternative approach where they get like a bit shy and they're like, well, that didn't go to plan, or like something to that effect. I have seen the light leave the eyes of various performers, whether they are quite new or quite seasoned professionals, and it's just, silence is okay, it's fine. And for the sake of the collective well-being of comedians, I need people to find fulfillment outside of comedy as well, because tying your self-worth to audience validation, not good, not a sustainable practice. You know, for me, I have a lot of different interests. I like reading and crafting and learning and just kind of getting really hyper-fixated on something that I randomly happen upon on social media. And by no means am I saying that I am the gold standard. I'm just talking from experience. The next thing I want to talk about is creativity. I have had so many ideas in my head for literal years, and it's not until I moved to Melbourne, got involved in comedy, that I was finally able to get things out of my head and onto the stage. For example, I had this idea about a fantail, or pi waka waka. More specifically, I thought, okay, what if I'm a fantail and I'm talking about how stressful it is to have my job? And to provide a bit of context, there is some mythology about fantails, how they deliver messages from the deceased, and that to me was really interesting. People weren't necessarily super stoked on it. I feel like the feedback I got was so lukewarm, but you know, at the very least it gave me the opportunity to flesh out the character, and it's definitely something I want to revisit. And that's just one of so many things. Like I say, this video is going to be very long, so I could make a whole video just talking about some of the different characters that I made, you know, different jokes, all the rest of it, but we'll park that for now. So yeah, it's just been amazing. It's been really rewarding. So that's the good side of things. I suppose something that I found very annoying is the fact that stand-up as a medium is very restricting, it's very limiting, and I don't know who said this quote. My cousin told me the story, and I don't know whether it was like someone she knew from school or maybe it was like a friend's child, I don't know. But this kid, instead of saying, "I'm bored," they said, "Oh, you're making me boring." And that is how I feel. I feel like that perfectly captures how I feel about stand-up, which is I go there and I'm like, these limitations are making me boring. Like sometimes I'll go to a gig and I'm like, this is boring. Everyone's boring, myself included. It's like stifling creativity. It sucks. Like literally there have been times where I've got bored of what I was saying as I'm saying it. So the alternative comedy space was really great for me because I really got to spread my wings. I've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about community because out of everything that I'm going to talk about today, this is probably the point I'm going to spend the most time on because I just have such complex feelings. Certainly I feel there have been so many benefits to meeting like-minded people because let's be honest, sometimes your family and friends don't get it. It's just not their thing, which is totally fine. That's totally valid. So, you know, being in a room with people who are just as chaotic and unhinged as you are, or even more so, it's a great feeling. It really is. And I would not be at the point that I am without this incredible bunch of people that have just given me opportunities, encouraged me, really, you know, appreciated my efforts. Like I mentioned before, alternative comedy, that is a space for me, and that's one recommendation I would have as well. Even though, like I keep saying comedy scene, comedy space, but there are different little pockets that exist, and sometimes it can take a while to figure out where you sort of fit. Some people like to be a jack of all trades, totally up to you, but that alternative comedy and improv, I cannot even stress how amazing, wonderful, beautiful, incredible people in the improv community are. And what I would say is, if you are ever getting cynical about the comedy space, improv will be your saving grace. Having said that, I am so sick of the gatekeeping, the clickiness, the immaturity, the gossiping, the bad kind, the backstabbing, the audacity, really. And earlier I talked a little bit about Australian culture, and another difference that I've noticed is here it's a much more individualistic approach. and obviously, you know, I'm making a lot of sweeping generalizations, but it's just something I've noticed from being back home to being here. And there's that element, right? And I find that a lot of people, you know, everyone has their different motivations for being involved in the scene. Some people are very, very serious. Like, it is so competitive, and I think a lot of people have this perception that, you know, I want to be successful. I'm putting that in air quotes intentionally because we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But I think some people think, oh, well, I want to be successful, so therefore anyone else who is also competing for those same spots, like, they're a threat. I don't want them here. And that's just not something that I vibe with at all. So, not great. And as a result, a lot of these rooms, you know, can be so hostile. Like, it is thick in the air, and I'm just like, no thank you, no thank you. It's really heartbreaking as well, because in comedy a lot of these relationships are very transactional. If I scratch your back, you're going to scratch mine. That's how this works. For me, I want to make friends. That was my own fault. Like, I can take some accountability, I can take some responsibility and say, maybe this environment is not really conducive for good friendships, you know? Maybe it is the case for other people, which is wonderful, and I love that for them. Has not been the case for me, unfortunately. Listen, like, I feel that there are a lot of rooms that I go to where it's very friendly, and, you know, I feel very comfortable, safe, happy, accepted, but I wouldn't say there are any relationships that have gone sort of beyond that surface level. And one phrase that I've used a lot, I tell people that I think because I was so isolated for so long back home, and there's many different reasons for that, some of which was self-inflicted, I have been really aggressively trying to enter the friendship market, and I think that my enthusiasm and my overly friendly approach was often met with suspicion, or this is just a theory anyway, you know. I almost wonder if people are like, why would you be so friendly? What do you want from me? I'm like, I just want to be friends. Just want to be friends with people who like the same things that I do, you know? And I think historically, when I have tried to cross that threshold of, you know, cultivating something that's a bit more, I don't want to say meaningful, because even people I just see in passing, like, that is still meaningful. But when I've tried to cultivate those closer connections, I just feel like things have either fizzled out or just burst into flames. And another thing, this occurred to me the other day, right? So a lot of us were really weird in school, and I myself, I'm 32 years old, so being different was a little bit more difficult, you know, in the time that I was growing up. So I try so hard to make sure everyone feels included, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I've always done a good job of that. I try and be very consistent, but there's probably a few times where I've dropped the ball. I can acknowledge that, but man, I try. I swear I try. And like, I think it's really disappointing to see people who one would assume had that experience and then also see those same people create those barriers, those walls, those cliques, and ostracize other people. It doesn't make sense. Because of this, as a result, third thing, I had to take some time to reflect and say to myself, okay, Maddie, you need to establish some very strong boundaries for yourself, because it was really having a detrimental impact on my mental well-being for multiple different reasons, some of which I've talked about already, some of which I have not got to yet. I was just getting far too tangled up in a lot of the toxicity, and I'm an adult, I make my own choices, my own decisions, so that was me getting in too deep, I think. And now I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what works for me personally. But something that I keep coming back to is Spirited Away. There's this scene where No Face has been eating all this food and then he becomes this gigantic beast. He is chasing after sin, and she says this line that I actually thought was quite poignant. She's like, I think the bathhouse is making him sick. And again, it's another line that I feel does a good job of capturing how I was feeling. Like, I really think systemically it's a very unwell space, which sucks. And it's not as though No Face is excused from being a menace and eating all those people. But you can't help but notice once he's out of the bathhouse, he's like so chill. He's so just calm and unbothered. Like, I did not like that it was just kind of starting to bring out the worst in me. So yeah, had to make some changes. When I say that it was bringing out the worst in me, I want to be a little bit more specific. So I just felt that I was regressing. I feel quite proud of the fact that I've done a lot of work on myself to grow, learn, mature, and it's as though I was falling back into old habits, old ways, an older version of me, and I've worked so hard to move away from certain behaviours, thought patterns. As an example, that level of insecurity really started to get a bit too much. Not great. And I'm also one of those people, I remember having a friend tell me, I think you're just one of those people where you're just very energy sensitive. You're very sensitive to other people's energies. So if other people are getting mad or frustrated, and rightfully so, about different happenings, because there's just a lot of nonsense. Like there's fun nonsense and then there's like problematic nonsense. There's a lot of problematic nonsense, and so people will get really mad and frustrated, and then I'll get mad and frustrated, and then we'll kind of just like rile each other up, you know what I mean? Like, it is so important. I know I keep saying that, it's so important, but it is very important to vent and get things off your chest and to know that you have a shared experience with someone. But it also does kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, like at a certain point, how does this serve us? How do we move forward? I feel like I'm being very vague, but yeah. So that is all I have to say about that. Moving right along, the next thing I want to talk about is problem solving. This is a constant challenge, but when I say challenge, it's actually a good thing. I have gone to a bunch of different rooms. Sometimes the time limits will be very short, others a lot longer. I think the shortest I ever did was maybe 3 minutes, the longest 10 to 12. And I'm one of those people where I really like to tell stories. I don't really do snappy jokes. So what it means is I have to edit. I don't really have a choice. I have to make some hard decisions and go, okay, is this really necessary? And that's something I've noticed even with the set that I did for Raw. I had a couple of different jokes which were kind of like the same joke, different font. You know what I mean? So ultimately I decided to cut that down. And then at the end, you're left with something that's very polished and refined. Because, yeah, sometimes when you have too much time, you can end up wasting that time. But it's nice to have a bit of wiggle room, because I'm one of those people as well. Like, I don't do crowd work generally. If it is, it's like, it's very low stakes, it's very chill, but for the most part, I pretty strictly stick to my script. But yeah, like sometimes you might forget something, or maybe something happens that prompts you to add something else. So I do like having a bit of a window. I guess the flip side to that is time limits. I mean, the rooms that I generally go to, they're pretty good with enforcing the time limits, but not always. From what I hear, because I have heard tales, sometimes you'll have comedians that will just go on and on and on, regardless of the fact that they are several minutes over. And, you know, kind of going back to that point that I mentioned about transactional relationships. So say you have someone who's gone over by a couple of minutes and you're like, well, I know that I should interrupt them, but they run a room and I really want to perform there, so I want to make sure that I stand their good books. So maybe I'll just let them do what they want to do, and then I can make sure that I get a spot. So that's really annoying. And another thing, gigs, particularly open mics, should not be more than an hour. Okay? Stop it. All right, 2 more things I want to talk about, and we'll start with opportunity. Now, I'll give credit where credit is due. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, whether you have no experience, a lot of experience. You can just go. You know what I mean? You can go, you can turn up, you can put your name down, and you can get up on stage. Now, obviously, things vary. The rules aren't always consistent between different rooms, different gigs. But when I look back, my stubborn, persistent nature actually aligned really nicely, because I just kept showing up, you know? Not only that, but I made sure to be polite, kind, professional, because folks, I don't know if you know this, but people tend to want to work with people who are nice and reliable and not awful. How about that? After a while, you build a reputation, for better or for worse. That's where things can get a bit frustrating, because unfortunately, there are those who are the worst, and despite that, they still get platformed, they still get spots. Yeah, but I am really grateful to people for giving me the opportunity to just give it a go. And then something that has meant a lot to me as well is, because I've been around for a little bit, making myself known, often, it's a mix of things. Lately, I haven't really been reaching out to people. I'm now at the stage where often people will reach out to me and say, hey, there's a spot available at insert room here. Would you like a spot? And I say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for thinking of me. Yes, I would love that. And I feel quite successful. And I want to spend a bit of time talking about that, because I think, and I'm going to say it again, it's so important. I think it is so important to redefine our metrics of success, because, say for example, if you look at social media following, I have, I don't know, maybe over a little over 100 followers on Instagram, but it doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do, like I can still show up. And I might add, there have been multiple occasions where I'm on the same lineup as someone who is very established, someone who has a massive following on the socials. So I think in a way, having not a lot of followers is kind of a flex, and I feel quite proud about that. And I don't know, I just, given everything I've talked about so far, other things that I'll talk about later, I just don't really think it would be a healthy thing for me to do personally, to go all in on comedy. And honestly, as of filming this video, I recently finished up at work, but I was actually just perfectly happy to work my job while doing comedy outside of work hours. It was and continues to be really fulfilling. But something that really stuck with me is a quote from a comedian. His name is Damien, although you might know him as Gary Starr, his alter ego. But there was a clip that showed up on Instagram the other day, and I just thought it was incredible. Basically, he talked about how, I think he was out for a run, and then his mum's friend, like he ended up seeing his mum's friend, and she said, oh, like I saw your show and I thought, man, like I haven't laughed in so long, and it just reminded me that I actually want to pursue my dream. Like, I ended up opening up a restaurant. That's my restaurant over there. I don't think I'm doing a very good job of articulating or summarizing the story, but when I saw that, I thought, that to me is like the ultimate definition of success, right? It's inspiring someone to follow their dream. That's amazing. And you know, in a capitalist society, because we live in a society, I just find that people often view success through the lens of followers, sponsorships, content engagement, and don't get me wrong, I understand that my motivations are very different from other people's, and I think there are certain necessities, I suppose, if you want to pursue comedy as a full-time thing. But it's not for me. These are things that I don't really care about. I'm just having a good time, you know? And as well, I just really like gassing people up and supporting people. I do not want children. And another thing that I was thinking about is, because of that, I feel like that mum energy I'm kind of redirecting to my comedy children, which is really fun. I like it a lot. You know, because at the end of the day, folks, we can't all be peacocks, okay? Because peacocks have a lot of feathers, okay? And that's too many feathers for one room. And we need different types of, we need different types of birds, okay? But not too many roosters, okay? Because if you have too many roosters, it makes the hens get really stressed. Also, before I move on, awards. This is such an interesting one, because in conversations that I've had with other comedians, or even when I listen to podcasts from people who are, you know, doing very well for themselves, have a pretty significant platform, like regardless of where you are on that scale, it seems like the consensus is, awards, they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. And yet, it is something that people strive for, and people are really stoked about if they do get an award, which, as you should be, that's awesome. I think that's really great. So it's such a peculiar one. There's this interesting contradiction that exists, and certainly awards are not the be-all, end-all. And I think that if you are pursuing comedy, you really need to be doing it because you love it, and those other things are just kind of like the cherry on top, right? I mean, for me, you know, I'm definitely not in it purely for awards, but I do find it exciting when I see something posted on social media about one of my peers who I like started out with. They get their flowers, you know, and especially when you've been in each other's orbit, you've been in close proximity, so you know they've done the work, and it's just, I don't know, like there was one video I was watching, a comedian getting an award, and I was just like, yeah, good for her. Okay, last topic. Men. Now, before I go any further, I just want to preface this by saying that when I talk about men, I'm talking about men as a collective, as an institution, right? Like, I myself, as a titanium white woman, when people of colour say, hey, I am seeing certain patterns, right? Certain behaviours that white women engage with that are detrimental and harmful to those communities. I hear that and I say, okay, understood. And it is my responsibility to take that on board and be supportive. What I'm trying to say is it takes time to build trust. And I myself, I have a rule that if there is a male comedian that I have not met before, I will wait until I see his material and then I will decide if I would like to interact. The thing is, there are so many men on the scene that I absolutely adore. They are truly some of my favourite people. I really, really mean that. Unfortunately, there are others who just, they make me really mad. Like, put it this way, sometimes I'll see male comedians and I'll think, oh, here comes trouble. And then other times I'll see a separate group of male comedians and I'll go, oh, here comes trouble. There are certain men who I refer to as the usual suspects. Their jokes are not funny. They are very unoriginal. It's real low-hanging fruit type stuff. And it's so, like, put it this way, at best, right, at best, when you have these sorts of men on the lineup, it's just gonna be not a fun time for audience members, and it's just going to be a deterrent for people to want to go again. But then at worst, it creates this environment that feels super uncomfortable and unsafe. The problem is as well, I and multiple other comedians have had discussions with certain people, and it's beyond frustrating when the BS still continues. But having said that, I am trying to be optimistic, because something I continue saying to myself is, these dudes aren't going anywhere, and it's actually to the benefit of everyone if they grow and do better. And kind of throwing back to the point I raised earlier about opportunity, one of the drawbacks is the fact that, and I guess going back to community, the scene is very cliquey, and a lot of the cis white men run these rooms. They kind of have a monopoly on the market, so it is very common to see lineups that lack diversity, which is really detrimental to everyone, because, you know, as an audience member, you get the best possible outcome when you have comedians from, you know, different walks of life, different backgrounds. Like, for me, because I've done it and I'm sick of it, I find it really exhausting to sit there and watch the same jokes just very slightly, particularly when they're just horrific. And I can see why, you know, I can see why a lot of people, particularly, you know, I guess particularly anyone who's not a cis white man, I can see why they would go, you know what, I don't really want to be in this environment, because why would you, you know? Why would you want to go to a space where you are going to be insulted, you're going to have to sit through, you know, joke after joke that is just made up of really derogatory and absolutely unacceptable language. The other thing that gets me as well is there are a lot of men who would consider themselves progressive, but actions speak louder than words. They really do. And the men just be acting up. These men are misbehaving, and I want it to stop. Anyways, there's more I could talk about, but I think I'll just leave things there. I have no idea how long this video is going to end up being, and I probably should have structured it a bit different, because that was quite the negative note to lean on. But as I mentioned before, I am so hopeful that a lot of these systemic issues can start to be worked on. You know, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but there are certain conversations that I see happening on social media, or I'll be having the conversations with people in real time that make me go, okay, I think we're making some progress, that's good. And despite all the despite all the challenges, the frustrations, overall, I'm still really happy to be involved. Like I say, I think it needs to be kind of from a distance, but it's been really rewarding, and I'm so excited to see where I am a couple of years from now, because already, man, it's so wild to think about. Like, maybe I'll leave things here. I'm getting very rambly, as I said I would. But I went to visit someone, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago now, and I had this very jarring moment, because I got off the tram and I was like, oh, this is all feeling very familiar. Like, I felt I was like transported to the past. And it took me a second to realize, oh my gosh, I just got off the tram exactly where I did before going to my first ever gig. And I thought, wow, I was feeling so nauseous and so awful. And now I just feel like I'm thriving, which is great. Yeah, so I don't know. I like structure, and I like to keep my thoughts. Well, in my ideal situation would be that I could just say everything so eloquently. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just trying to go with the flow a little bit, because that's something I also didn't mention earlier. But you know, I try to be really structured with my material, but I'm also trying to learn how to be a little bit more loose with things. Like, I'm such a perfectionist. So yeah, I am going to be a little bit rambly, but again, it's just who I am. So, and you know, that's fine. All right, so things are probably looking a little bit different, because I filmed the majority of this video on Wednesday. It is now Friday. I ran out of battery and steam, but we're back. We're here. And I don't want to say too much else because I've done the majority of the editing for this video already, and it's just shy of 1 hour, which doesn't surprise me. Like I said, there was much to discuss. Honestly, this could be a whole series, but I'm gonna press pause on that for now because there's a lot of other videos I want to make. Got a couple of things in the pipeline. Fingers crossed I can keep the momentum going, but this is something I always say and then life happens. So I don't know, we'll see how we go. But anyways, I have been talking for a very long time, so I will leave things there and I will see you next time. Bye.